the reason why I wanted you to read those two, and I usually, the class, a lot more people do it. Usually we have about 5 to 10 or so presentations, and we get a nice different variety of analysis of the same stuff. And it's interesting to see. Notice we had 2 of the same book and 2 different approaches to it, and 2 different people that came up with things that it affected them differently. That's the whole point of great literature, is it affects you differently. The reason why I chose these was because they approach life from a different angle. Death of Ivan Illich is an extremely powerful book. When I was a philosophy major, I went and I wanted to go to law school because I realized after working some time at getting a philosophy degree that there's no job you can get with a philosophy degree. So
teach philosophy.
So I thought, well, I've got to go to law school to do something with my degree. So I started looking at law schools and applying, and one of the things that you have to do is you have to have letters of recommendation. And so I went to some of my professors that I really enjoyed, and I would talk to them after class and stuff, and I went to one of these guys and I said, hey, will you write me a letter of recommendation for law school? And he said, I will, but I don't think you should go to law school. I said, what? Why not? He said, I went to law school. And I said, well, then why didn't you become an attorney? He said, I'll tell you what happened to me. So I went to law school, and in my 3rd year of law school, the last year of law school, I was in a class, and the professor made us read the book Death of Ivan Illich by Tolstoy. And he said, I finished reading the book, I put it down, I went to the school, to the dean, and I withdrew from my classes and dropped out of law school after reading the book. And I went over and applied for the PhD program. And he said, and I luckily got accepted because I had just withdrawn from law school. And when he told me that, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. What is in this book? What is so powerful that he would just immediately walk over and withdraw from law school right before he finished? And so I read it. And like a fool, I decided to go to law school after reading it. But it's a powerful book. And same thing with Crito and Phaedo that Plato wrote about Socrates. The story of Crito, which she pointed out in great detail, hopefully you guys understood what was going on with that, is Socrates was charged, he was a philosopher, he'd go around and spout his ideas. And the government didn't like what he was saying. They said he was corrupting the youth. Too many kids were listening to him and getting crazy ideas based on what he was saying. So they tried him for corrupting the youth. And they convicted him of corrupting the youth. And they sentenced him to death. And while he's sentenced to death, one of his servants comes and says, hey, I bribed the guards and I arranged to have you escape. You can take off, you can be free, let's go. And he says, no, I'm not going anywhere. He says, no, I bribed the guard, let's go. The door's open, let's go. He says, no, I'm staying right here. He says, why? And he explains to him why in this. And the point that he makes is the purpose of life is to seek piety, to seek that which is right. And you do what is right no matter what. And he says, I was able to enjoy the benefits and freedoms that this great country provided me, that the laws that this great country provided me. Why do I think I have the ability now to thwart those laws and to leave? Exactly. And so he says, you do what is right. And so when you see the world this way, like you said, this is an a priori analysis of life. You do the right thing. Whereas when you look at Death of Ivan Illich, how does he see his life? Is the outcomes and what happened. So Death of Ivan Illich was a story about a man who chased the dream. He said, okay, to be successful in life and to be happy in life, this is what you have to do.
You have to check the boxes.
That's right. You have to do these things. Why society has told me that I have to marry the right person with the right connections, I have to get the right education, I have to get the right job and become an attorney and then a judge. I have to make a lot of money, I have to live in the right neighborhood and have the right size house and then hang out with the right friends. And if I do all of those things and I have my 2.5 kids, I'm going to be happy. Happiness comes from doing all those things that society tells you to do to be happy. And so what did he do? He did all of those things. Yes?
Is success and happiness the same thing?
That's the point that he makes. That's the whole point he makes, is that he was extremely successful in the realm of checking those boxes, doing the right thing. But in the end, he realized that his wife didn't give a crap about him, and his wife said, shut up and die already. His kids thought he was annoying and whining while he was dying. All of his friends that he thought were friends were just talking about how to divide up his stuff afterward and who was going to get what.
Wife too.
Nobody cared about him. He was just somebody that was a stepping stone for them. And it wasn't until the very end that he realized that life wasn't what it was all cracked up to be. The irony, the imagery of this story is great. He's climbing a ladder when he falls off. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
He's climbing the ladder of life, rung by rung, and he falls off and he injures himself. And when he does so, he realizes that all the people that he was climbing for don't give a crap about him, and the only person that cares, the only person that listens, the only person that reaches out to him is the least of everybody around him, his servant. And his servant holds his legs up to alleviate the pain, and his servant listens to him while he talks. And his servant spends the time with him when nobody else does. And he realizes that everything he was seeking was for naught. And he wasted his whole life. And that epiphany crushes him as he dies. So, I would like to leave you with the secret to life as critical thinkers. You ready for this? This is the secret to life. The secret to happiness. The secret to success. And I think they can be the same if your goals are right. Right? Success is merely achieving your goals. So if your goals are correct, then success and happiness go hand in hand. So I'll tell you the secret to life as soon as I tell you about myself and how I got to the realization of what the secret to life is.
Can you tell us about the secret to your tattoo?
And I'll tell you about that too. Thanks for reminding me. I'll tell you about that too. In fact, that's perfect. Thank you, because it's part of this. When I was younger, I was very shy, and I was very timid because when I was young, I didn't know how to say my R's, so I would sound like, you know, Elmer Fudd. You had the same thing? Yeah. So I had a very bad speech impediment where I couldn't say my R's. Not only that, but I had a very bad stutter. So I was kind of Porky Pig and Elmer Fudd mixed together, where whenever I opened my mouth, I would stutter very, very bad, and I couldn't say my R's, and so I sounded funny to the other kids. And so I always wanted to keep my mouth shut. On top of that, I had a bladder control problem as a kid. And so I would wet myself all the time. Now, as a little kid, it's no big deal. You know, running around as a 2-, 3-, 4-year-old kid, no big deal. But when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and you've got a wet spot on the front, which I was a very active kid running around playing all the time, so it really wasn't a wet spot, it was more of a mud spot. because I'd be out there, you know, and dirt would stick to it, and I'd have this mud spot on the front of my pants. And so as you can imagine, I was a social pariah with the other kids. I'm the guy that stutters, couldn't talk, couldn't say his R's, and was wetting himself all over the place. I also wet the bed until I was 13 years old. So I was jacked up. But as a result, I was so shy and such an introvert. And I saw myself as being weak, and I saw myself as being taken advantage of by other people, because to a large degree I was. And at some point I thought to myself, I don't want to be that person. I want to be somebody else. I want to be somebody different. And I had an uncle who in my mind was the person I wanted to be. He was tall, and he was successful financially, and his personality was very bombastic. And he commanded a room as he walked in, and people listened to him. And he was a person of authority. And I thought to myself, that's who I want to be when I grow up. And so I started watching him and watching his movements, and started watching the way he spoke to people, the way he moved his hands, and the twitch on his face, and little things like that that I could try to mimic. And I decided I wanted to be like him. And I decided I didn't want to be that weak child. I wanted to be a powerful, dynamic person. And so I started stepping outside of who I was. When there was people there that I didn't know, I thought, oh, I don't want to talk to them, that would be embarrassing, and that would make me feel stupid. And so I would go, so what? And I would step out and say hi, and I would do those things that made me feel uncomfortable over and over again. And slowly I became the person that I wasn't. I became an outgoing person. And I took speech therapy, and I learned how to speak. I learned how to slow down. My mind would always go very, very quickly, and I stuttered. And so I learned how to slow down a little bit, so when I speak, I wouldn't stutter. It took a lot of work on my part to overcome my speech impediments. And I eventually got to the point where, as you can imagine, as you know, I went to law school, and I became an attorney, and became a professor, and became all those things that nobody would have ever thought that little stuttering kid would have become. So to the outside world, I was successful, right? But when I read Death of Ivan Illich, I realized that I started doing what he did. I started chasing the things that society told me were important. I started chasing those outward successes and not realizing that happiness comes from the small things in life. And I realized as I grew older, and I've told you this already, that my happiness, and when I look back in my life, the happiest times in my life were the simplest times, when I was the poorest, when the kids were young, and when I had the least amount of stress and the least amount of stuff. And I've been chasing the stuff the whole time, and realizing now the more stuff I get, the more money I make, the less happiness it brings. And so I want to share with you the key, I think, to happiness and success. And it's this tattoo. You guys wondered what the 5 was, right? You guys know the Bible, the Old Testament, story in the Old Testament of David and Goliath. Has everybody heard of the story of David and Goliath?
Yes. Yeah.
You know the story? David was a young man. He was 14, 15 years old or so, and his older brothers were out at war, and they were fighting the Philistines, and the Philistines had this big old dude. His name was Goliath, and he was like 8 feet tall, and nobody could beat him, and he would go out and just smash everybody and take a sword and chop heads off, and everyone would just go running.
It's back when average height was like 5 foot.
Yeah. And so he showed up to bring some food to the front lines, to his family, to his brothers who were fighting, his father fighting. And he got there, and everyone was cowering and hiding, and Goliath was standing out in the middle of the battlefield, and he was mocking everybody, calling him names, and David said, go get him. And they said, no, are you kidding? Look at this dude. We're not going to get him. He'll destroy us. And David said, but God's on our side. And they said, look at how big he is. And he said, okay. So he went over to a river. And he picked up some stones, picked up 5 smooth stones. And he took those 5 smooth stones, and he went out to Goliath in the battlefield with his sling and started swinging his sling over his head. And Goliath looked at him and said, why are you sending children out to fight me? And he says, I'm going to crush you, I'm going to destroy you, I'm going to eat your bones, or I don't know, if you fight both of them. And he starts flinging these stones at Goliath, and Goliath laughs at him, and sure enough, one of the stones hits Goliath right between the eyes and caves his skull in, and Goliath drops dead right on the spot. And he slays the giant with a little stone. And so I try to remind myself all the time that it's not the big things in life that control your life. It's not big decisions that you make that control your life. You have been lied to by everybody else in your life. You don't make big decisions for success. You don't decide to be an attorney. You don't decide to be successful. It just doesn't work that way. You make small decisions. It's the small decisions every day that add up to the big decisions. It's the small, everyday decisions that lead to success. If you want to be an attorney, you don't just say, okay, I'm going to be an attorney. You say, okay, to be an attorney, I have to do well in school. How do I do well in school? I have to show up to school. I have to do my homework. I have to turn it in on time. I have to get up in the morning to get to school. I have to, all those little small decisions every day. You can't just decide to be an attorney. You have to get there. And getting there is a million small decisions, including getting up in the morning. When the alarm goes off, what does everybody want to do? Hit snooze. The successful person gets up. That's the difference in life. It's that small decision. When you have homework, what do you want to do? You want to put it off. It's a successful person who does it now. When you leave in the morning and you look and you see your bed's not made, what do you want to do? Leave it. No big deal. I'll make it next time. It's a successful person that takes the time to make the bed in the morning. I'm serious. It's little tiny decisions in life. When you talk to successful people, they are not the people that put off. They're not the people that shirk the day-to-day stuff. They're the people that make the small decisions in life. And that leads to success. So, I challenge you to make a conscious effort to focus on the small things in your life. Those little small things every single day. Focus on just those little tiny things. And before you know it, you'll have achieved way more than you could ever achieve focusing on the big stuff in your life. Remember that money doesn't bring happiness. Degrees don't bring happiness. Jobs don't bring happiness. Relationships with people bring happiness. Remember Death of Ivan Illich. It's the relationship he had with that servant at the very end that brought his happiness. And all the money, and all the wives, and all the kids, and all the homes was nothing for him at the end. And in the end of your life will amount to one thing. And that is who's standing around you on your deathbed. That's it. Everything you've achieved in your life comes down to who's there when you die. Will your house be there? Will your car be there? Will your friends be there? Or will your children and your spouse and the people that you've influenced in your life be there? That's who's going to be there. And that's what it all comes down to. So, remember that.